This is Birds 365. Not a very happy morning after what the Eagles have done these last couple of weeks. Jeff Kerr laughs. You got a good attitude, Jeff Kerr. I'm pretty down in the dumps and finding it difficult to laugh, but you should laugh in the face of adversity. Good for you, Jeff Kerr.
Flush it. Flush it, Jeff. Flush it.
Yeah, we flushed it. They're 0-0, John. Didn't you know that?
0-0. You only got one flush left. The next one, everything goes down.
Very difficult to believe when the Eagles were trying to put forth that narrative yesterday. You believe anybody? Was there any one individual who said any one individual thing that you go, all right, maybe, just maybe they can hang their hat on that? Or did you just listen to it and hear the teacher from Charlie Brown going, wah, 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 wah?
Well, I was with Brandon Graham for 6 minutes yesterday. I believe him because Brandon Graham has earned the benefit of the doubt. And I really do think the defense is trying to get things right. They just don't have the personnel. They don't have the talent. And Matt Patricia's going to be out of there after next week or 2 weeks or whatever it's going to be. Sean Desai is going to be out of there. I just think they're trying to do the most they can. I just think this offense, though, they look lost. They can't pick up a blitz. I don't think their offensive linemen have an answer. And look, I know they didn't have A.J. Brown for a lot of this game yesterday, and Devonta Smith wasn't there, but this has been a recurring thing for 5 weeks. And I just said this on a radio spot just 20 minutes ago. It feels like they heard all the talk when they were 10-1 about how they weren't any good. And it just snowballed when they actually were losing games. And now they just can't get out of it.
Yeah, it's funny because I can't look past the defense to get to the offense. There's plenty of issues with the offense. By no means am I trying to give them an excuse. Jalen Hurts looked terrible yesterday. There's no plan for the blitz, and it's Wink Martindale. It's not like somebody surprised you coming out that, oh, we're going to get pressure today. So that is disturbing to me. But, boy, I can't get past the defense. From play number one, Jeff Kerr, play number one of the game, they're playing cover two. So they have Hassan Reddick dropping into covers like a cover two linebacker. So, that's not the greatest plan in the world. And not shockingly, as Tyrod Taylor starts to escape the pocket, instead of staying with his responsibility, Hassan, natural instinct, go get the quarterback, and wide open receiver right behind him for a big gain. That's the kind of stuff that happens when you change your defensive coordinator after 13 games. I mean, this is the dumbest decision in the history of the world. There might be a little bit hyperbole there, but this is the dumbest decision in the history of the world. Okay, if you think the guy stinks, you do it earlier. And I'm talking about Sean Desai. You don't do it after 13 games. And you certainly don't do it after you played Buffalo, which everybody struggles with, and San Francisco and Dallas at home, which was scoring 40 points a game at the time. And all of a sudden, they lose 3 games to teams they shouldn't lose to, as Jody pointed out. If they win those 3 games, Jeff, Seattle, Arizona, the New York Giants, you're supposed to win those 3 games. Seattle's pretty good, but they had a backup quarterback. They're not a terrible team, but you get the point. The other 2 are terrible. I think everybody's fine. Doesn't mean anything, but the record looks good. I think everybody's fired up for the playoffs. You have the number 2 seed. Everything's fine. That move is a freaking disaster. It really is.
I want to add on to this. The domino effect would have happened. The 49ers would have had to play yesterday.
They
would have had to play because the Eagles would have had to, the same record if we're going by this. And yeah, what did the 49ers end up? 13-4? So
yeah, well, that would have shifted their mentality. I do believe they would have played. They would have still had the number 1 seed. It's pretty good.
But look, because the Eagles had to play yesterday, A.J. Brown don't get hurt. Jalen Hurts don't dislocate his finger. So everything just kind of adds up.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you about Jeff. Let me ask you about the quarterback. And yes, he's got a hurt finger, and I give him credit for at least gutting it out and trying to go back in and play. And then they unquestionably were going to get him out of there ASAP. He was lousy before he hurt his finger. and he hasn't been very good for like not weeks, months. This is the guy they made a $250 million commitment to. And I know how great he was last year, and I've been on the Jalen Hurts bandwagon since draft night. I got concerns about the quarterback going forward. Everybody's going to worry about Nick Sirianni should be fired, the entire coaching staff. They've linked themselves to a quarterback who had as big a regression from year to year as I've seen in a while, Jeff. When was the last time you had an MVP runner-up go from that high heights to below the middle of the pack? That's what Jalen Hurts is this year. He's below the middle of the pack in quarterback play in the National Football League. How much attention should we be paying to the quarterback and what kind of an effect he's going to have on the future of this organization?
I don't think Brian Johnson should be responsible for Jalen Hurts anymore, if you want my honest opinion. I've had enough.
Brian Johnson is dragging Jalen Hurts down.
I don't like. I always say this in my life. In my life, I don't need my buddy when I'm struggling telling me, "Oh, you're doing a good job. You're doing this. You're doing that." I don't know if Brian Johnson's telling him that, but it seems like Jalen Hurts needs his buddy, his companion around to kind of help him get through some things. And look, I could be spitballing here, but it's just not good for him. I think he needs tough coaching right now. And I don't know who that can be. Shane Steichen probably was that guy. I mean, and you still have Brian Johnson around, but now Brian Johnson is the guy calling plays, the guy responsible for this guy throwing. By the way, do you guys know Jalen Hurts has the same exact numbers Dak Prescott had last year in terms of touchdowns and interceptions? And we ripped Dak Prescott to no end.
I pointed out Dak would regress back to the mean pretty consistently. I said Dak had a history of not turning the football over, and he's probably going to go back to not turning the football over. And he did. And I feel the same way about Jalen Hurts because he's been very ball security conscious for most of his career. Not as long as the stretch as Dak, but still pretty consistent, not turning the football over. I do think he'll bounce back next season. But I think the Carson Wentz, Jalen Hurts ain't the same guy as Carson Wentz.
No, he's not.
He does not. It does not bother him. I think that the relationship between Brian Johnson, Jalen Hurts, everybody brings up Press Taylor and best friends. They're not best friends. Guess what? Brian Johnson knew him when he was met him when he was 4 years old. Well, guess what? When you're playing for, you're not hanging out with a 4-year-old kid. When he recruited him twice, he didn't get him. It's not like they've been thick as thieves. I think it's so overblown. I think Jalen Hurts is not Carson Wentz. He's not looking for people that say, "Oh, you're great." In fact, I think he's looking for the opposite, which people have said pretty consistently. Nick Sirianni said. Nick Sirianni yells at him pretty consistently over the years. How many other quarterbacks get yelled at? Because he's got that coach's son's mentality. I think because Philadelphia went through it with Carson Wentz, they think it's happening again. It ain't happening. He is not Carson Wentz. He's not. He's tougher mentally. He doesn't care if people yell at him. They're not best friends. They're struggling, but I don't think that's the reason.
I just don't think Brian Johnson should be here anymore. And there's too much connections to the guy. I mean, personally, that's just how I feel about it. Look, I'm just looking at it from a number standpoint. You went from, like Joe said, you went from a guy who was runner-up in MVP last year to a guy who is below average right now. And is it all his fault? No. I mean, the play calling has a lot to do with it. The lack of adjustments, the pass protection, receivers hurt. There's a lot involved here, but this is one of the top 5 paid quarterbacks in the league. He's not on a rookie deal anymore. And I agree with you, John. I think he is going to regress back. I shouldn't even say regress back. Progress to to where he was last year, because he doesn't turn the football over much. This is an anomaly for anybody, but it's just frustrating to see a guy this good play this bad.
It's a little scary from my viewpoint that I know Nick Sirianni keeps saying he likes to be coached hard, but that's just Nick Sirianni. He's his coach. I'd really like to hear from somebody else other than his coach that, hey, I know this guy, one of his teammates, to come out and say, yeah, the coaches are rough on Nick and he eats it up. And that really motivates Nick. The only guy I've heard it from is Sirianni. So I'm not just going to blindly accept that Jalen Hurts is the kind of guy who can be coached hard. I don't know that
You've heard it.
You've
heard it from Shane in the past. You've heard it from Brian. You've heard it from Alex Tanny. You've heard it from AJ Brown, who has difficult conversations with him as the diva receiver. I think you've heard it from more than Nick Sirianni, and I think you've seen it again. When I see a quarterback getting yelled at by a head coach, that don't happen a lot in the NFL.
Mike McCarthy does not yell at Dak Prescott. I'll tell you that right
Nobody yells at their quarterback, especially a proven guy, I should say. Sometimes there's some young guys. There have been so many quarterbacks playing this year because of all the injuries. I think you've heard it from far more people than Nick Sirianni. I think you've heard it from Jalen himself. Now, that might not be that meaningful. But yeah, I don't have any questions about his ability or his. I should say I don't have any questions about him stopping the mindset of he wants to be coached easily. He doesn't want to be challenged. I don't see that with Jalen Hurts. I see plenty of issues with Jalen Hurts, but that's not one of them. And I think that's one of the advantages when you start talking about, because people make the natural comp, and it's because they're in Philadelphia. I get why they do it. He's not Carson Wentz. He just isn't.
No, he's not. But I want to point this to you, John, or maybe this is just me spitballing here. Do you feel like the front office is trying to avoid the mistakes they made with Carson with Jalen now?
The best example, somebody gave me the entitlement equation, and they brought up Joel Embiid with the Sixers. In that, are they pampering him that way a little bit too much now that he's the $250 million guy? Even that, I don't believe. I could buy that a little bit more. I don't necessarily believe it. But I mean, clearly there's something wrong. I'm not trying to say that. Clearly he's regressed from last season. Maybe it's just a natural regression because last season he had such a phenomenal season. Talked about it all the time. I talked about what all the defensive players. How many players had career years on the Philadelphia Eagles last season?
A lot.
A lot. That generally doesn't. You don't usually. Some people do, but most people don't usually follow up a career year with another career year. It usually regresses back to the mean. That's what you have to be concerned about. Is this the real Jalen Hurts as a player? And was last season the outlier? That's what I would be concerned.
We had this question with Josh Allen in 2021, and he came back to not 2020 level, but he was pretty damn good in 2022. In 2023, he was really damn good. I mean, as you saw last night against the Dolphins. So I think that's what you got to hope for. Like Jalen Hurts, maybe he'll never get to the 2020 level again, but or the 2022 level, but I don't think he's going to be anywhere near.
And by the way, guys, I'm still of the belief, even this season, I know you said he might be below the average statistically, but I still think he's a top 10 quarterback in this league this season. He's probably 10, or he's probably right there though, which ain't good enough.
As judged by how?
Film and that kind of stuff. Let's see. I'll look where PFF had him coming in. And the grades aren't updated from yesterday, which he was a disaster, so that'll hurt him. But he didn't play that much. And they had him. They had him 6th coming into the game.
6th? Yeah, 6th. I'm disagreeing with that.
Only Josh Allen, Dak Prescott, Lamar Jackson, Tua, Brock Purdy, Jalen Hurts. 6th.
Well, I'd have all those 5 ahead of him right now. There were a lot of guys hurt this year too, like Justin Herbert, Kirk Cousins.
Cousins is 7 because he played enough. Stafford was 8, Herbert 9, Mahomes 10, Jared Goff 11, CJ Stroud 12.
On what planet was Jalen Hurts a better quarterback than Patrick Mahomes this year?
I think CJ Stroud was a better quarterback than Jalen Hurts this year.
Agreed. No question. No questions asked about that one.
Yeah, well, part of it is, again, we're not talking about 6 games. We're talking about 17 games. At one point,
which quarterback are you referring to with 6 games?
Jalen. He lost 5 of 6, but I'm saying,
okay.
And everybody has that. Everybody has that in the forefront of their mind. They were 10-1,
and he was a top. I think if. After 10-1, I think we all could have sat here and said Jalen Hurts was easily top 5.
At one point, he was the leader on the MVP betting. I think people forget that. At one point, he was the leader, and obviously things.
You know where I elevate Hurts? I actually think he's one of the guys that can carry a football team. And I think you saw that through the first 11 games of the year. They probably were not a 10-1 team, and he elevated them to be in the 10-1 team. They probably were never that good, and he regressed a bit, and the team did. So
if you take the last 6 games, he's been well below average. But again, it's an entire season.
It's a 17 game. Yeah, I got him in the middle of the pack as per 17, not just these last 6. These 6 have dragged him down enough to get him into the middle of the pack. That's just my rating.
I'm with John. I think I'd have him like 10, maybe 11, maybe 9.
They have him higher than I would have him, but I'd have him right in that 10. 11, somewhere in that range.
When you drop from 2 to 10 or 11, that's pretty damn significant.
No, I agree.
Maybe he's not 17th.
And that's 11th. What I said. The bigger problem is maybe that's where he's going to settle. 10, 11.
Which isn't good enough. I agree, John.
Yeah.
When you're being paid top of the market money, that's an issue that Howie Roseman's going to have to deal with. And no one this year has convinced me otherwise. I'm going to make a statement here, and I can honestly look everybody in the streaming eye and say, I don't know this, but I believe this. We talked so much about belief today. Where do you come up with your belief? I believe there were conversations had between Jalen Hurts, his agent, Howie Roseman, Nick Sirianni, and Brian Johnson during this offseason, alerting Jalen to the fact that he's now a $250 million quarterback. And he might not be able to run with reckless abandon like he did last year, which is a big part of what made him the number 2 quarterback in the entire National Football League. That discretion is the better part of valor, that we can't afford to lose you for a long period of time during the year. I don't know if the conversation was started by the Eagles front office, by the Eagle coaching staff, by Jalen's agent saying, listen, we're now going to be a different guy. You're signing a slightly different quarterback. You're not going to be running. Or Jalen himself, who said, I got to be out there for my guy. I can't put myself at risk. I believe that conversation was had. How often, on how many levels, who was the person who started the conversation? I don't know any of that. But I do believe has happened because Jalen Hurts is just not the same guy. He's not. And I think that it's kind of a domino effect with his ability to run and make plays with his legs. He's just not doing it. I think it came in as an agreement with everybody involved. I don't think it was fear. I don't think it was him being greedy and I got to protect I think it was a group decision that we're going to use Jalen differently going forward. And I think that decision has failed miserably.
Well, I've heard that, and I believe it to a certain degree. I know from Jalen, from a personal perspective, it was very important for him to play all 17 games, which he managed to accomplish. And the thought process was, and then in the playoffs, all right, we're going to play. You're going to play like he normally plays last year. So if that happens, maybe that's something to hang your hat on. Maybe if he's trying to get through the season's over, now it's win or go home, and now it's all right. Maybe it's back to what it was.
And think about this, John. The last 2 years, had the ankle injury in the playoffs, and he had the shoulder injury going into the playoffs. And it did affect him a little bit early in the playoffs, but the Eagles were good enough they were going to get by it. This year, it looked like he was going to be healthy-ish going into the playoffs, a lot healthier than he was the last 2 years, and then the finger injury happened in Week 18. So, yeah, I agree with that. I think the key was let's have our $55 million quarterback, or 50, well, I forgot how much he makes now, our $50 million quarterback healthy going into the postseason, and we'll take our chances. And, running Jalen, aggressive Jalen, no prisoners Jalen, I think this team is as dangerous as any. But now we got to worry about whether, and I think he's going to play, but I think we got to worry about how's the finger? How's that going to be? AJ Brown, how's the knee going to be? It's, again, all kind
Devontae, how's the ankle going to be?
Yeah, domino effect. It's kind of crazy. Like last year, they had the luxury of losing to the Cowboys and losing to the Saints, and it's just like, okay, whatever. They're going to be the number 1 seed. They're going to win the division.
Yeah. By the way, 19 consecutive years, NFC East. No back-to-back champions.
Hey, isn't that crazy?
It is crazy.
By the way, Ron Rivera is fired.
We got an Eagle goal for next year. I know we're looking many, many, many moves down the road. Win that division. Eagles keep the Cowboys from being the team that wins.
I mean, Eagles probably will win the division next year based on the history.
Yeah. So that's crazy. But I got to go back to the defense. I mean, what are they trying to accomplish? I want somebody to explain.
How about Nolan Smith in coverage against Saquon Barkley yesterday? Wasn't that a sight to behold?
I mean, sometimes you get caught. I'm okay with. I'm not one of those people that say you can never drop Hassan Reddick in coverage. I think that's silly. I always use the baseball analogy. Nolan Ryan didn't just throw fastballs. You got to throw a curveball. I have no problem with that. When you're doing it too much, it starts, to be a problem. You mentioned Nolan Smith on Saquon Barkley. I mentioned Hassan in cover 2. Why? What is going on? What is going on?
John, I kid you not. So during the game yesterday, right after that, Nolan Smith, Barkley had that 46-yard catch. There were a couple former NFL players and a couple current college players text me and go, "What are they doing over there?" And I'm like, I'm assuming you mean Smith on Barkley. And they're like, yes. Like, how can you put this kid in a position to succeed covering Saquon Barkley? And I'm like, I don't have an answer for it. I don't. And it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy what Matt Patricia's doing. Like, I always believed to get the most success out of the talent you have around you, you put them in the best position to succeed. Hassan Reddick rushes the passer. Nolan Smith rushes the passer.
Josh Sweat. Josh Sweat. Emmanuel Acho at Emmanuel Acho, former Eagles linebacker, does a good job breaking down film. He puts something up pretty quickly.
He's more than a hot take artist, by the way.
He's very good with film. And he breaks down 3 specific plays where I'm like, the words he used were atrocious, awful, and gross.
Gross, definitely.
I don't, and this is from a player's perspective who played linebacker. I mean, cover 2, were your responsibilities. I brought up Reddick, kind of in his mind, he's obviously a pass rusher. So he loses discipline and you have a big play. Josh Sweat, same thing. He loses discipline, simple route, a combination by the Giants. He was supposed to keep the inside guy, he goes to the outside guy because he's not used to being coverage. It's all communication issues, and they made it worse by what they did.
And that's what the players were talking about when Sean Desai was there. We got to fix the communication. Multiple guys said that in that second. By the way, John, is Tristan McCollum the guy next week?
No, I think, and we'll have to see. Obviously, they have an extra day. It's Monday night, which we haven't mentioned. So another Monday night game, Eagles Buccaneers in Tampa Bay. So they have an extra day. I do think Reed will be back. I think that was more precautionary than anything else. So I think it'll be Reed Blankenship and Kevin Byard, but remember, they started defensively with the 3 safety look, and Sidney Brown was getting better and better and better, and now he's gone. So that's off the table because you don't have any depth, and unless you want to go to Tristan McCullum or Mekhi Gardner or somebody of that nature, which they don't want to do. So that part of it's off, and now you're going to have to rely on more 2 linebacker sets, and you don't have good linebackers. And you don't have depth at linebacker. Your corners hopefully are better because Slay's back, and you don't have to play Ringo and Ricks as much. But Bradbury's having a bad season. The only thing helping you out next week is it's Tampa Bay, and they're throwing for 113 yards against Carolina, the worst.
And they have the worst running offense in the NFL, which means that they'll run for 150 against this team.
Yeah.
And by the way, John, I didn't see better play when they were in the 3 safety look. You're right. Their linebackers stink. They stink on ice.
You saw better play from Sidney Brown, though.
Sidney Brown was...
I think he was getting better, but I'm not going to overstate it. He wasn't great. He was making mistakes, but I think he was adding something to
But he was a player you could hang your hat on and say, look, this guy is improving. Keely Ringo was the same way. Eli Ricks was the same way.
Exactly. For me, it was Brown and Ringo, and they brought a little physicality and athleticism. And Ricks is very good in coverage, but I had some problems in run support. It's really bad in run support. But at least it gave a little bit of juice and at least a little bit of optimism, because I think they really, really lack athleticism on the back end. And to put Brown and Ringo in there, you can kind of see it because those guys are so athletic. But they were making a lot of mistakes. I'm not going to say
the improvement for me is slight. Do you do it? Yeah, because you got to try and put the best team out there. And I'd rather have the more athletic guys and certainly the younger guys, because guess what, folks? Eagles probably going to get beat. I'm not declaring a loss next week yet because Tampa is a marginal playoff team at best. But the week after, if they find a way how to win it, there's no way I'm going to pick them to beat the Lions or the Cowboys or anybody else.
If Tampa didn't lose to the Saints, which, by the way, Dennis Allen should not be a head coach today, but he probably will be. And if they didn't play like absolute garbage.
The Saints destroyed the poor Arthur Smith. Got him.
By the way,
and running up the score, too.
I love how Dennis Allen's players defied him and decided to give Jamal Williams that touchdown in victory for the nation. That's the Dennis Allen I know.
Classless.
But anyway, besides that, but if Tampa Bay didn't play so bad against Carolina and they didn't lose to the Saints, I'd say they kill the Eagles. But this is probably the ideal opponent for the Eagles at this point.
So I'm not just discounting, but at some point the Eagles are going to lose this year. I believe that. And it could be exactly 1 week from today. And then we got to turn the page. You got to look forward for the future. And yeah, I want to see Brown and Ringo out there rather than either Shaq Leonard and or any other linebackers they thought they had. All of the linebackers. Well, let me turn into a question. Either Jeff, you or John. Of the linebackers on the Philadelphia Eagles roster right now, how many will be with the team next year?
Ben Van Summerlin.
Yeah, Ben. That's about it. I would say, Ben Van Summerlin.
One.
One.
Now, at least Brown and Ricks and Ringo are going to be here in 2024. So,
Nakobe's going to be
that's
here.
What your job is as a coach is to
Nakobe.
prepare guys, not only win in the moment, but have a half an eye on the future. I just didn't see that much difference. They've been just tremendously awful on defense, no matter who they put out there over the last month. So if you want to hang your hat on, hey, at least they're young. Okay, I'm with you on that. At least they were better. Not really. They stink. I guess there's levels of stink, but the defense is stunk with
Well,
them out there on the
I
field,
saw
too.
some signs of potential improvement where I don't see that. That's probably a better way to phrase it. I think there was some potential improvement there.
Potential being a key word, yes.
Yes.
It's kind of like what we saw in Milton Williams a couple years ago. Like, you saw the potential for him to be an impact player on this team.
Yeah.
That's how I feel.
By the way,
Yeah.
how about Keegan Michael Key, the comedian, does that NFL script writing thing, if you guys have seen it, where they get script. How about all the things that happened? Matthew Stafford's going back to Detroit, and the Packers are playing the Cowboys, and Mike McCarthy, and Houston and Cleveland with Deshaun Watson and all that stuff. He's not playing, but
there's a lot of connections.
A lot of
these
connections.
games.
The NFL script writers got it right.
By the way, Chiefs and Dolphins are playing again too.
Tyreek Hill going back. Yeah, that was one of them as well.
Also, you know what I honestly feel is going to happen with the Eagles coming up. So I'm really weird with watching old NFL games, old NFL teams, because I'm fascinated with some of these teams. And the 99 Dolphins always fascinated me because that team was not good. And Dan Marino was god-awful his last year. Dan Marino won one road playoff game in his career. He was 38, could barely throw a football, and beat the Seahawks in the Kingdom. And then
Kingdom. We were talking about that.
Yeah, we were talking about this yesterday. And then what did they do the next week? They lose 62-7 to Jacksonville, the largest.
Oh, I remember that game.
Yeah, you remember they were down 38-0 before Dan Marino completed a pass in his final game.
That's what I get. That's what I get a feeling about the, not to that degree, but I get a feeling like the Eagles are going to out-talent Tampa, and then they're just going to get their heads handed to them.
And pick your poison. Is it the 49ers or the Cowboys?
Yeah. That's kind of my feeling of how it ends for this team. But and I'll leave it there. At Jeff Kerr CBS. Make sure you follow Jeff on X, Twitter. Read him at CBS Sports. Nick Sirianni fired. It would have been laughable to consider this weeks ago. Now the groundswell is building. I'm still in the camp where he's not getting fired. But boy, people are really pushing that.
You know what, though, John? If they lose next week, you got to at least have the conversation about it.
Do you?
I don't think he's getting fired either. But I do.
Like Jody brings up a good point where he tells me, he asks his callers, well, yeah, you can fire anybody. Who's coming back?
Who
are you replacing with? And I just said it with the coordinators. You thought it couldn't get worse with Gannon, which was absurd, and it got much worse. You thought it couldn't get worse than Sean Desai, and it's gotten worse. I mean, does anybody learn from mistakes? Now, owners tend to be more emotional. Jeffrey Lurie, from a logical standpoint, I'll say this. There's no way Nick Sirianni's getting fired. And I'm going to have to argue this with Les Bowen, who's going to come on at 9:20. There's no way you should fire this guy. Does that mean they can't fire him? No. Of course, Jeffrey Lurie's already he won a damn Super Bowl and fired a guy in 3 years.
Do you think, though, they go this approach? Okay, Nick, you keep your job. We're picking the coordinators this time.
No, I agree with that.
That's what I think's going to happen.
And
that's what John said all last week, and I couldn't agree with him more. There's the point to where Sirianni should be fired. And then there's the behind closed doors conversation about the redoing of the staff. That's what happened to Doug Peterson. That's how he got his walking papers. Yep. They wanted to completely gut his staff. He wanted to elevate guys. They couldn't get on the same page. Jeff said, listen, if you're going to put your foot down about this, Doug, we can make a real big decision here. And they did, and they fired him. That could get Nick Sirianni fired. I think John's got the exact right read on that. The biggest determining factor could be how they're going to handle the coaching staff going forward.
John, I want to present something to you here. I don't think he's going to get fired, but I've had him on my list of guys getting fired. Matt Eberflus. If he got fired, would you take him as the defense coordinator for this football team?
Oh, yeah. Defensive coordinator. Yeah. And by the way, you're going to see offensive coordinators as well, and people are going to want these. And
Ron Rivera just got fired, by the way.
Yeah.
On here.
I don't want Ron. I think
I don't want him either. Yeah. He's done.
Matt Eberflus, and he's a cover 2 guy, and I think they need simple. They need simple right now. and they need to shift away from the Fangio scheme. And I think Matt's doing a really good job. They were bad in the first half of the season, Chicago defensively. And all of a sudden, the second half, they had one of the best defenses in the NFL because young players, Jalen Johnson, man, the Eagles should have tried to trade for that guy. They are playing well. People weren't paying attention to them because they were so bad, but they were playing well down the stretch.
Their general manager, who you've taken a couple shots at, John, made a hell of a trade at the trade dedeline, getting sweat.
Yeah,
people are going, why would you go get him?
By the way,
because they're trying to build a better team, and he has added a ton to their defense.
I got to give a shout out to Montez Sweat. He's the first player in NFL history to lead 2 teams in sacks.
Wow.
Yeah.
Same season?
Yeah, he's a good player.
Yep.
Yeah, I give credit where credit's due.
Yeah,
But part of the reason is, Ryan Poles, he's GMing for his job, so he's got to get some players in. And that's the part. That's where Howie has an advantage over other
But
GMs.
doesn't Ryan Poles deserve some credit for trading that #1 pick and getting the #1 pick?
Well, it depends what he does. Yeah, I mean, it depends. Now he's got to take another quarterback, right? And he's got Justin Fields. What are you going to do with Justin Fields? Is he going to be able to spin him off for anything?
I think the Atlanta Falcons and a lot of teams would take Justin Fields.
I think a lot of teams will too. The question is, are you getting a second-round pick, or can you talk somebody into a first-round pick? And you got to get this quarterback right. And I'm not as sold on Caleb Williams as everybody else.
Yeah, near am I. I think you got to have that honest conversation about him and where Drake May's better.
Yeah, we got months to decide that. Jeff Kerr, always a pleasure, brother. Thank you very much for coming on today. We will get you on again next Monday. It might be the last in season.
Might be Tuesday. We got a Monday game.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
John, are we
going to Seattle? Do you know yet, Jeff?
I will find out today.
Okay.
But John, if we go, are we going to be taking the emergency Spirit flight back so we can get back in time for locker clean out?
I got to get the folding chair out and take the I always joke it's like flying on a folding chair for 2.5 hours. It's probably the way it's going to go.
Always a pleasure, Jeff Kerr. Thank you very much for jumping in.
It sounds great. Thanks, guys.
That's Jeff Kerr, CBSSports.com. All right, late ad to the program. Our good friend Les Bowen said he would jump on. I didn't ask him until 20 minutes ago. Brian Cameron from Philly Sports Network was supposed to jump in with us today. Do us all a favor. His daughter got sick last night. Had to rush her to the hospital. So please, little thoughts and prayers for our buddy Brian Cameron. But Les Bowen said, I'll hop in. Thank you, Les, for coming in off the bench last minute. Mac coming back with more Birds 365. Stay right here.